Good morning, and thank you so much for your patience as we worked through things and got everybody here after presenting a couple bills this morning, et cetera. So I would like to call the joint meeting of Senate Finance and Assembly Ways and Means to order, and I'll welcome everyone here in Carson City and in Las Vegas and online to our meeting. I'll be chairing this morning. I am Senator Marilyn Dondero Loop, and will the secretary please call the roll?
Assemblymember Anderson, Assemblymember Backus, Assemblymember Brown May, Assemblymember Dickman, Assemblymember Hafen, Assemblymember Hibbets, Assemblymember Howdigi, Assemblymember Koenig, Assemblymember Mosca, Assemblymember O'Neill, Assemblymember Torres Fawcett, Assemblymember Watts, Assemblymember Yeager, Senator Buck, Senator Cannizzaro, Senator Neal, Senator Wen, Senator Stone, Senator Taylor, Senator Titus, Assemblymember Monroe Moreno, and Chair Dondero Loop.
And I am here. Thank you very much. I think we have everyone here, which is great this morning. All right, just a reminder, as always, please turn off or mute your electronic devices. Please make sure if you speak, you state and spell your name, hand the secretary a business card if you have one. And lastly, there will be a public comment period at the end of the meeting. Today we have one subcommittee report on the agenda, so we'll get right to it. And once again, thank you for your patience. And I'll invite Mr. Malone and his team. Thank you all for all your hard work to present the subcommittee report this morning on K-12 education funding budgets. Welcome back, Mr. Malone. And when Mr. Leiser is done with his passing duties, he's almost at A+ rating with this. Mr. Leiser, you will get your Good Student Award certificate at the end of the week. That's not a possibility until June 3rd, and then I would be happy to send you home early, sir. All right, with that, Mr. Malone and team, please go ahead.
All right. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committees. I'm James Malone, LCB Fiscal. To my right is Liliana Kamolchapoko, and to my left is Yuri Yakovlev, and we are the education team here at LCB Fiscal. I will be walking the committees through the subcommittee closing report this morning. The Joint Subcommittee on K-12 Higher Education CIP completed its review of certain budget accounts for K-12 education in the executive budget for the 2025-27 biennium, which include the Education Stabilization Account, Pupil-Centered Funding Plan Account, Nevada Teacher Advancement Scholarship Program, other state education programs, professional development programs, 1/5 Retirement Credit Purchase Program, Teach Nevada Scholarship Program, and account for state special education services. The subcommittee recommendations result in a decrease in general fund appropriations totaling $93.7 million in fiscal year 2026 and $30.2 million in fiscal year 2027 when compared to the governor's recommended budget. The following highlights the more significant closing recommendations of the subcommittee. For the Education Stabilization Account, Budget 2032608, the subcommittee considered the total estimated reductions in revenues of approximately $208.6 million within the Pupil-Centered Funding Plan budget account in fiscal year 2025, which reflects reduced revenues of $159.2 million from the legislatively approved budget based on the May 2025 consensus forecast for fiscal year 2025 and a $49.5 million general fund transfer from fiscal year 2025 to fiscal year 2024. To address this shortfall, while also considering the projected reduction of expenditures due to actual enrollment being less than projected in the legislatively approved budget for fiscal year 2025, the subcommittee recommended the inclusion of language in the 2025 K-12 education funding bill to authorize a permanent transfer of $126.9 million from the Education Stabilization Account to the Pupil-Centered Funding Plan budget account in fiscal year 2025. In addition, due to reduced revenue projections for the State Education Fund from the May 2025 consensus forecast for fiscal year 2026 and fiscal year 2027, the subcommittee recommended $115.7 million in permanent transfers from the Education Stabilization Account to the Pupil-Centered Funding Plan budget account in the 2025-27 biennium to maintain the statewide base per pupil amount as recommended by the governor as amended of $9,416 in fiscal year 2026 and $9,486 in fiscal year 2027. The next budget, the Pupil-Centered Funding Plan account 2032609. The subcommittee recommended approval of total funding of $5.724 billion in fiscal year 2026 and $5.761 billion in fiscal year 2027 for the Pupil-Centered Funding Plan, which is a decrease from the total funding of $5.748 billion in fiscal year 2026 and $5.785 billion in fiscal year 2027 recommended in the executive budget as amended, and excluding the recommended salary adjustment tier. This decrease of $47.2 million is reflective of updated enrollment projections, revisions recommended for the funding model by the subcommittee, and technical adjustments. Based on an updated consensus revenue projection prepared by the Fiscal Analysis Division and the Governor's Finance Office in May 2025, a reduction of non-general fund revenues of $162.9 million was reflected in the Pupil-Centered Funding Plan budget account for the 2025-27 biennium when compared to the amounts projected in the Governor's recommended budget. To partially offset these decreases and provide the funding needed to maintain the statewide base per pupil funding amounts recommended by the governor, the subcommittee recommended a $115.7 million transfer from the Education Stabilization Account to the Pupil-Centered Funding Plan budget account over the 2025-27 biennium. The subcommittee recommended approval of general fund appropriations of $2.773 billion over the 2025-27 biennium, which reflects the base general fund appropriations from the 2023-25 biennium of $2.626 billion plus a combined inflation and enrollment increase of 5.61% as provided in the governor's recommended budget as amended, totaling an increase of $147.3 million over the 2025-27 biennium. The subcommittee recommended the following items related to expenditures from the Pupil-Centered Funding Plan account. Approving food service and transportation costs totaling $193.6 million in each year of the 25-27 biennium, utilizing the previously legislatively approved methodology to calculate these costs based on the average expenditures over the past 4 fiscal years for each school district. Approving local funding to support pupils with disabilities totaling $599.8 million in each year of the 2025-27 biennium, utilizing the Department of Education's new methodology to calculate the local special education funding based on actual local special education expenditures, less ineligible revenues reported by each school district, charter school, and university schools for profoundly gifted pupils in their special education fund. Not approving the governor's recommendation to establish a new salary adjustment tier within the Pupil-Centered Funding Plan totaling $287.9 million in general fund appropriations, but instead recommending to transfer general fund appropriations of $249.9 million over the 2025-27 biennium for a school district salary adjustment program to the Department of Education's other state education programs budget account. The subcommittee did not recommend approval of the governor's recommendation of general fund appropriations of $38 million over the 25-27 biennium to include charter school personnel in the salary adjustment program. Approving the governor's recommendation as amended to apply a rate of inflation of 5.61% to the statewide base per pupil calculation based on a 3-year average using consumer price index data from calendar years 2021 through 2023. Approving statewide base per pupil funding amounts of $9,416 in fiscal year 2026 and $9,486 in fiscal year 2027, which are equivalent to the statewide base per pupil funding amounts reflected in the governor's recommended budget as amended. Approving updated enrollment of 463,752 pupils each year of the 25-27 biennium based on the Department of Education's projected enrollment count for fiscal year 2025. Approving a Nevada Cost of Education Index adjustment of 1 for all counties as recommended by the governor and the Commission on School Funding. Approving an attendance area adjustment based on the previously legislatively approved methodology as recommended by the governor. Approving the fiscal year 2020 baseline funding methodology to provide funding for the adjusted base per pupil amounts, weighted funding, and tiered funding amounts. Approving a proportional reduction to support fiscal year 2020 baseline school districts that would apply to the adjusted base per pupil amounts and weighted funding categories for all local education agencies, but not tier funding categories. Approving funding pupils enrolled in online schools within school districts funding at the fiscal year 2020 baseline at the adjusted base per pupil amount as recommended by the governor. Approving the governor's recommendation for weighted funding for English learner pupils at a 0.45 weight, at-risk pupils at a 0.35 weight, and gifted and talented pupils at a 0.12 weight, which provides funding of $232.7 million in fiscal year 2026 and $234.4 million in fiscal year 2027 for English learner pupils, $165 million in fiscal year 2026 and $166.2 million in fiscal year 2027 for at-risk pupils, $9.9 million in each year of the 2025-27 biennium for gifted and talented pupils. Approving the continued utilization of the Infinite Campus graduation-related analytical data, also known as the GRAD score, for identifying at-risk pupils as recommended by the governor and the Commission on School Funding, and including language in the 2025 K-12 education funding bill to prescribe the GRAD score as the identifier for at-risk pupils unless a contrary regulation is adopted by the State Board of Education. Approving Budget Amendment A 2522-12609 to remove general fund appropriations of $17 million for charter school transportation costs over the 2025-27 biennium, which would be considered as one-time funding through separate legislation. The subcommittee also recommended a letter of intent to be issued by the full committees directing the department to work with the Commission on School Funding to review the methodology utilized to determine the amounts allocated for the local special education tier within the pupil-centered funding plan, and provide any recommendations to improve or maintain the methodology, and study and provide a recommendation on the budgeting methodology that should be utilized for the salary adjustment program for K-12 education, including the possibility of including this funding into the pupil-centered funding plan. For the Nevada Teach Advancement Scholarship Program, budget account 1012622. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $323,628 in fiscal year 2026 to fund a liability of potential payouts for Nevada Teacher Advancement Scholarship Program participants. The subcommittee further recommended the committees issue a letter of intent directing the department to reconcile the Nevada Teacher Advancement Scholarship Program participation and associated future liabilities and report its findings to the Interim Finance Committee no later than July 31st, 2026 for consideration when the 2027-29 biennium budget is developed. Reconcile the Nevada Teach Advancement Scholarship Program along with the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program on a semi-annual basis starting in fiscal year 2026 with reports due to the Interim Finance Committee no later than January 31st and July 31st of each year of the 2025-27 biennium. Finally, the subcommittee directed the department to utilize the $500,000 in remaining reserve authority in fiscal year 2025 to pay all provider payments for awards provided over the 2023-25 biennium. Other state education programs, budget 1012699. The subcommittee recommended approval of Budget Amendment A 251582699 to remove general fund appropriations of $6.8 million in each year of the 2025-27 biennium from the other state education programs budget account to fund the Incentivizing Pathways to Teaching program, and instead recommended to consider this funding as a one-time general fund appropriation of $13.6 million in fiscal year 2026 provided through separate legislation. The subcommittee recommended approval of Budget Amendment A 257072699 to include wage assessment revenues of $2.4 million transferred from the Department of Employment, Training, and Rehabilitation in fiscal year 2026. In addition, the subcommittee recommended an additional $2.4 million in wage assessment revenue in fiscal year 2027, along with budget policy that Nevada Department of Education utilize wage assessment revenue before expending general fund appropriations for the Incentivizing Pathways to Teaching program, and that general fund appropriations provided to the Incentivizing Pathways to Teaching program be reduced by the same amount provided by the wage assessment revenues to maintain total funding of $6.8 million in each year of the 2025-27 biennium. Regarding benefit funding through the Incentivizing Pathways to Teaching program, the subcommittee recommended approval of language in the 2025 K-12 education funding bill to establish parameters for the distribution of program funding based on a stipend rate of $800 per week for up to 12 weeks, and no tuition assistance in recognition that the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program is available to provide tuition assistance. Finally, the subcommittee recommended legislation to amend Nevada Revised Statutes 391A.705 and NRS 39A.710 to eliminate the Incentivizing Pathways to Teaching Programs authority to provide tuition assistance awards. Although not included in the executive budget, the subcommittee recommended omitting historic restrictive language in the 2025 K-12 education funding bill to allow the department to utilize state, career, and technical education funding for leadership and training activities and pupil organizations pursuant to NRS 388.392. Additionally, the subcommittee recommended retaining historic reversionary language in the 2025 K-12 education bill to not allow the department to bounce forward unexpended state career and technical education funding at the end of the fiscal year, and recommended legislation be drafted to amend NRS 388.397 to remove the authority to bounce forward unexpended state career and technical education funding at the end of the fiscal year from statute. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation of general fund appropriations of $314,293 in each year of the 2025-27 biennium to increase funding for the Jobs for Nevada's Graduates program. However, the subcommittee recommended placing this funding in the reserve category and requiring the department to submit a work program to access the funds if federal or local revenues are not received as budgeted for the Jobs for Nevada's Graduates program that would lead to program reductions. Professional Development Programs, Budget 1012618. The subcommittee recommended approval of $882,946 in general fund appropriations for projected salary and benefit increases as recommended in Budget Amendment A251942618. However, the subcommittee recommended this appropriation be provided to the Interim Finance Committee contingency account, which would require the regional professional development programs to submit requests for funding after providing supporting documentation detailing the amount of collectively bargained salary and benefit increases. For the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program, Budget 1012718, the subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommended budget, inclusive of Budget Amendment A254212718, to provide total general fund appropriations of $2.4 million in each of the year for each year of the 2025-27 biennium. For the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program, the subcommittee further recommended issuing a letter of intent directing the department to reconcile the Teach Nevada Scholarship Program participation and funding on a semi-annual basis starting in fiscal year 2026, with reports due to the Interim Finance Committee no later than January 31st and July 31st of each fiscal year of the 2025-27 biennium. The account for State Special Education Services, Budget 1012619. The subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $256.1 million in fiscal year 2026 and $260.9 million in fiscal year 2027 for the State Special Education Program, which includes $14.4 million over the 2025-27 biennium to fund 2% roll-up costs associated with merit salary increases for special education staff. In addition, the subcommittee recommended restoring the 13% supplemental program originally recommended by the governor to be eliminated, but recommended for restoration in Budget Amendment A256392619. Finally, the subcommittee recommended not approving the governor's recommendation as submitted and amended by Budget Amendment A256392619 for the 13% supplemental program funding provided in a fiscal year to be considered in the base budget for state special education funding in future fiscal years. The subcommittee recommended closing the following budget account as recommended by the governor: 1/5 Retirement Credit Purchase Program. And Madam Chair, that concludes the subcommittee's closing reports, and we are happy to address any questions.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that information. Do we have any questions? Senator Titus, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the report and the thoroughness of it. Would you please give me, you mentioned that there was a recommendation for using the education stabilization account in two separate areas, 126.9 million and 115.7 million, and just doing the rough math there, that's 242.6 million that we're moving from the education stabilization account. Would you tell me how much we have in that account currently before that transfer, and obviously the subsequent amount that we have after that transfer?
Yes, give me one moment. Do you have it? Yes. Okay, prior to it, sorry, again, James Malone, LCB Fiscal, for the record, through you, Madam Chair, to Senator Titus. Prior to the transfer of $106.9 million in fiscal year 2025, the balance in the education stabilization account was estimated to be $845.8 million in fiscal year 2025. Estimated to balance forward after the transfer in fiscal year 2025, the balance is $746.1 million. My apologies. Yes. And then after the transfer, let me get to that real quick. After that transfer, the balance is estimated to be $639.6 million if interest earnings is realized at $9.2 million in fiscal year 2026.
Do we have a thank you for that. And may I follow up, Madam Chair? I was just wondering, is there a statutory limitation on what we can transfer from that account?
Thank you for that. There is no statutory limitation.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question.
Any additional questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, I'll accept a motion from Chairman Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, staff, for all the work that we've been doing over the last 3 days, it seems like, on this budget. I truly appreciate everything that you've done. Madam Chair, there is one amendment I'd like to make or change suggestion. I'd like to approve the document as read by staff, except for the account for state special education services.
Excuse me, what page are you on? So
If we go,
that they
I'm
can
sorry, if we go to
follow?
page 11.
Okay, good, thank you.
If you can go to page 11 and also go to page 104, members, if you could do that. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would move that instead of including the 14.4 million over the 25-27 biennium to fund the 2% roll-up costs associated with merit salary increases for special education staff. If we could turn to page 104, if members remember, in those of us that were in the subcommittee, we had 3 choices. At the time, we went with the governor's recommendation, which was A in that decision box. I would like to move that we go with B, eliminating the 2% roll-up for merit increases for special education personnel and reallocating the $14.4 million to local education agencies below the targeted 0.46 statewide multiplier proportional to the number of budgeted special education pupils. This option would also limit the increase in the maintenance of effort in future bienniums, and also approve C, placing the funding into a reserve category, which would require the NDE to submit a work program to the Interim Finance Committee prior to distributing the funds, thereby allowing the Governor's Finance Office and the Interim Finance Committee to review the proposed allocations and ensure that the targeted funding for the multiplier aligns with the legislative intent. And with all other items to approve as read by staff and give staff the authority to make any technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you very much, Chairman Moreno. A second from Senator
Oh, second.
Nguyen? Or somebody. Thank you very much. And with that, is there any discussion on the motion? Senator Titus.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I absolutely appreciate the the most recent motion that we just passed, especially regarding the SPED funding. I think it was critical to make that adjustment. So I do definitely appreciate that and acknowledge that. However, having said that, unfortunately, at this time, the way this budget, even with the amendment, is presented, page 4, I just cannot accept the fact that we are not giving the charter school teachers who are public employees the raises that I feel that they deserve, as all teachers do. It's not that I'm against children or I'm against teachers. It's the fact that I am for them, that I'm no on this budget the way it's currently, even with the amendment presented to us today. I hope to. There has been lots of discussion about a future bill coming forward that will take care of this issue, and I'm really looking forward to supporting that bill, and then I will support the budget once I see some true movement that's really going to happen. So having said that, I'm going to be no the way it's currently written, with the hopes that I can get on board with some future bills coming forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, and I will go to Assemblymember Mosca.
Thank you, Chair, and I will be in support today and thank the subcommittee and our staff for all their hard work. And I want to thank the Assembly Subcommittee Chair and her remarks yesterday on the record to clarify the special education budget questions we've been hearing, and thank our Assembly Chair for the motion today and continuing to work on this through the Interim Finance Committee. If I'm lucky to continue to have the support of my voters, I look forward to continue to be in this body in the future and hope to work on and examine how specifically state-sponsored public charter schools, the public charters that are authorized by our state, are funded, and especially those who serve primarily students who identify as Title I special education and in lower income communities like East Las Vegas and Assembly District 14 that I represent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Senator Beck.
Thank you, Chair Dondero Loop. There are 61,883 children and the public charter school teachers who are once again being pawns in this game. 81 charter school campuses spread across all of our districts. In fact, sitting in Senate District 3, 6, and 8, we have some of the most at-risk charter schools and teachers that are serving these populations, and they are outperforming their district counterparts by 2 to 3 stars. And so I will be voting no today because, again, we are leaving charter schools who have not been asked to come and present a plan to IFC, but I was told that they didn't submit a plan to IFC. That's why we can't allocate it for them. But if you just ask them for a plan, they would give you a plan and let you know how they are trying to reward teachers for serving children in these areas, in these charter schools, and giving parents more choice. So I'll be a no today.
Thank you very much. And I would just comment, we probably need to drive my district. We have some beautiful buildings and schools. With that, I believe, Assemblymember Hafen, did you have a comment or?
Thank you, Chair. Actually, the speaker was just helping me with the, I just wanted to know from a technical aspect what exactly the change in the motion was from the subcommittees, and the speaker was gracious enough to point me to page 103 where that detail is, and so I thank the speaker and I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I believe Speaker Yeager has a comment.
Thank you, Chair. Building on some of the comments I made before, I think it's been made abundantly clear by the members of this committee that we are still working on the charter school teacher pay raise increase. And I think it was made abundantly, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, but that we weren't in a position to be able to approve that at the moment, but we hope to be in a position to be able to approve that before we wrap up session. Given that, I frankly just don't understand how you could vote no on this particular budget. We're talking about $250 million to extend the educator and educate support professional raises that were given last session. When we did that bill last session, thanks to the Senate Majority Leader, there were a lot of concerns about whether that money would continue to be in play or not, and there was concerns about, well, is this really just one-time funding, and the rug is going to be pulled out from under folks. we are again allocating the $250 million in this bill. So I just don't know any other way to interpret a no vote on this item other than to tell those hardworking educators and education support professionals that we want their pay to be cut. And I am not willing to do that because there's another issue that's being worked on. We certainly all the time in this building work on issues simultaneously, but to say somehow that we're going to devalue the teachers and education support professionals who we worked really hard to give raises to last legislative session because we don't like something else that's happening in the building, frankly makes no sense to me whatsoever. Again, I think it would be irresponsible to vote no on this because of what it would mean for teachers and education support professionals in those 17 school districts. So for that reason, Chair, I am obviously a yes on this motion.
I appreciate that. I have said multiple times in this committee, with public money comes public accountability, and it's not about who's better than who. So thank you very much. Assembly Member O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be voting yes on this today, but I will reserve, there's a lot of good in what we're trying to do here, and I agree with that. Leadership on both sides have said they will work towards the issue on charter public school, the teachers' raises for the charter school raises. I'll reserve. I trust that you will continue doing that, and when the budget actually, or the motion makes it to the floor, I will look at it then again. But I have faith that we can do it. We have 20-some days, which is a lifetime in some ways left. So in short, I trust you all. The governor has made his statement on the importance of this, and I'll vote yes, but reserve my right, Chair, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Assembly Member. I appreciate that. Any additional comments? Majority Leader Canizaro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I first want to thank the Speaker for his comments because I agree. We have talked a lot about teacher raises here in this building. We've talked a lot about how important our teachers and all the staff that support them are, and our fundamental belief that every child should be in a classroom with a qualified teacher and staff to support them. If you believe in that at all, if you believe that children in this state are entitled to a quality education from a teacher in their classroom and all the people that help to make that possible, then this is a budget that you should vote yes on, because it includes not only the funding for our schools, not just public schools in the districts, but also for our public charter schools. That's what's in this budget. If you believe in making sure that we're supporting special education kids and all of their IEPs, that's what's in this budget. If you believe that we should be supporting teacher raises and all of the people along that way, then that's what's in this budget. And if you don't want to vote for that, then by all means vote no. I also want to be very clear that, because apparently there are just, I think there are some members who are not paying attention in the subcommittee, because that's the only way that you can get to some of the conclusions that we've reached today. We have been talking about this charter school raise issue for quite some time. And in as much as it relates to how it is that we are going to allocate that money, there have been questions along the way. We were presented with a budget from the governor's office that just picked Washoe County School District based on the number of pupils that exist in Washoe County, and then purporting that to be equal to the charter schools. When we doled out 231 funds last legislative session, we did so on a teacher and administrative support and support professionals and all the people along the way from that staff bucket that make that possible. We asked for all the school districts to give us those numbers. How many teachers do you have? How many staff people do you have? And that is how those dollars were allocated. If you go back and read the language of that, or if you were present on IFC or watched any of those hearings, that is exactly what we asked of the school districts. And the reason why we put that money in 231 instead of putting it into the budget was because we wanted to guarantee that there was going to be some response from the school districts that they were giving raises to teachers and staff, because that's where we wanted that money to go. And so we said to them, if we believe in accountability, which seems to be a topic of conversation around this building a lot, especially when it pertains to education dollars, then what we want is for the districts to come and tell us how many teachers you have, how many staff folks you have, and what is it that you are going to give them in raises, what would be feasible, what does that mean, how are you going to accomplish this? And I know I see some of our superintendents from school districts here in the room today. They all came before us and they said, here's what's going on in our school districts, here's how many folks we have, here's what we're going to do in terms of raises. And we as IFC then said, here's your allotment from 231 funds. Thank you so much for being transparent with us. Thank you so much for being accountable to the folks that you employ who are teaching our students. We are going to give you these additional dollars. And that is where you come up with those 231 funds. What we have said in this subcommittee, in the various conversations that we've had and the questions that we asked of NDE when they came to us, was how did you get to this number for the charter school raises that was presented in the governor's recommended budget? That number was based upon the number of students that exist in charter schools, and they just said it's sort of like Washoe County School District, and they got this much money in 231, so that's how much money we want. That is not an equitable assessment, because we weren't talking about students, we were talking about teachers and support staff. That's the same reason why we elected to create a separate salary adjustment bucket for the 231 funds, because if you run that through the pupil-centered funding plan, you actually result in a decrease to the amount of funding that we gave to school districts, because it's not on a per pupil basis, it's on a staff and teacher basis. And so we said, hey, we have some questions. Can you get us some numbers on how many people it is that you are actually employing in all of these charter schools? We got some of those numbers. And in the work session in the subcommittee, where we had a very robust conversation about this, and I also made comments about this, that we didn't think we had all of the numbers because we weren't accounting for some of the school district sponsored charter schools, and so we needed to also include them in that number. And so we needed to continue to work on this. And I said at that point in time, we were going to have to get into some of the more numbers of how many people you were employing, how much money really made sense, and how it is that we were actually going to allocate that to all of the charter schools and ensure that raises were happening. Then again, the other day, when we approved these issues in the subcommittee, I said very clearly on the record that yes, we are interested in giving charter school raises, and yes, we are working on that from a policy standpoint. But if they want to be included in the same fashion that 231 funds were given, then not only do we need to do that on a per teacher and staff basis, but we also need to have those schools and the charter school the SPCSA come to us and all of these folks and say, here's how many folks we have, here's what we're going to do for raises. Now you state in IFC, can you come and give us these matching funds? That is on the record. There's multiple conversations about this. And to the speaker's point, we can do two things at once. We can approve a budget for the things that we know, and then we can also work on legislation to implement things that are new. That is not a reason to not vote for this budget. Additionally, I would recommend to anybody on this committee who questions that to go and talk to some of the folks here in the room who have come into my office, who I've had meetings with, who represent charter schools, who are working with all the folks who are doing a good job of educating kids about whether or not there is a commitment to talk about charter school raises and to make sure that that gets done, because those meetings have been happening all session long. So I think that it is wildly inappropriate to vote no on this budget unless you don't support education, unless you don't support teachers, unless you don't care about kids who are on IEPs. That is what this budget does. So a no vote means that. You don't get to come back later and say, well, I'm going to change my mind because, there's another piece of legislation out there. You either agree we can do two things at once, and you can agree that we can have these very public conversations that have been very clear about where we stand on these things, and you can say we believe in accountability, but if we believe in accountability and we believe in transparency, then our charter schools should be willing to come and do the same thing that we asked of all the school districts. Period. End of story. So I'm a strong yes on this. And again, in case it was not clear the several times that we've had this discussion, I remain committed to working on the charter school raises in a fashion that makes sense, where we are going to make sure that those dollars actually go to those teachers and staff. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you very much. All right, with that, Assemblymember Koenig.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm a weak yes on this. To be consistent with my vote in the subcommittee, I will go yes today, but I reserve my right that if the things I have confidence that the charter school issue will be taken care of, but for some reason that it does not, I reserve my right to change the vote.
Any other comments? Okay, I believe we have a motion and a second on the floor. And with that, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Nay. Motion, would you please raise your hands for those nays? All right, we have Assemblymember Hafen, Assemblymember Dickman, Assemblymember Hempitz, Senator Buck, Senator Titus. Did I get everybody? Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Stone. I got, yeah. All righty, I think that's it. Motion passes. Thank you very much. All right, with that, that brings us to our last agenda item today. For those providing public comment, please remember to state and spell your name. To provide testimony via the phone, you will dial 888-475-4499, and you will enter the meeting ID of 872-5437-4869, and then press pound. When prompted for the participant ID, please press pound. We'll begin here in Carson City. Thank you again, staff, for your expertise. Good morning. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Good morning, Sarah Adler, Silver State Government Relations, representing a coalition of independent charter schools in Northern Nevada. We simply want to thank you all so much. We have been heard. We greatly appreciate Madam Assembly Ways and Means Chair Monroe Moreno, her amendment this morning, and your support of it. And really, we appreciate all of your comments. We, too, have confidence and appreciation that the salary equity will move forward through the process. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ben Dixon, for the record, I am the director of the Northwest Regional Professional Development Program, and I am here representing all three of the regional professional development programs that serve Nevada educators. During the previous school year, the RPDPs, or Regional Training Programs, as we are referred to in legislation, had over 21,000 individual points of support and connections with school leaders, educators, and support personnel professionals across the state. We appreciate the sustained funding that allows us to continue to serve the educators in the state and to support state initiatives passed by the legislature. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mary Przenski, here representing the Nevada Association of School Superintendents. Just to say thank you to all of you for your consideration, for your very hard work, for your long hours, and for talking to everybody. And we know there are other items that people are concerned about will be taken care of. We're confident that your hard work will continue and that all the kids will be taken care of to the very best of your ability with limited funds. So thanks a lot for everything you've done. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Brad Keating for the record, representing the Clark County School District. I just want to echo what Mary just said and give a heartfelt thank you to each of you for the hard work that you do each and every single day. This is not an easy task. I hope the public understands the late nights, the early mornings, the calls, the texts, everything that you all get. We are faced with difficult times in the state, as we've seen with the Economic Forum and the State Education Fund. And decreases, and each of you have done everything you can possibly do to keep education whole. I appreciate that. I appreciate this committee looking out for all 460,000 students in the state of Nevada, making sure that special education students are taken care of, making sure our English learners are taken care of. You all do every single thing every day to fight for students, and I just want you to know that that's recognized and that's appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else here in Carson City? Anyone in Las Vegas? Seeing none, we will go to the phone lines. AVH, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working. However, we have no callers at this time.
Thank you very much. And we'll go to opposition. I'm sorry.
That's it.
I was going to have this whole hearing all over again. All right, thank you very, very much. And with that, that completes our agenda today. I would like to thank everyone for being here. I would once again like to thank staff for your expertise and assistance in helping us work through all of this. You are remarkable. And I would like to thank everyone for your participation in this meeting. I believe Chair has something to say before I close off.
Ways and Means Committee, your day isn't over. We'll be meeting downstairs at 10:30.
And with that, thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.